Hello, I'm Shane Briant. A very interesting thing took place on the set of Frankenstein the Monster from Hell. We actually designed an alternate opening, which I'm sure is still somewhere in the archives at Hammer Studios. And it would be nice if one day they kind of restored that in like a special features section or something for the production. They may already have for the UK. It was a very interesting piece. When I was talking with Norman Mitchell, who plays the constable in the film, he had mentioned that he'd been in numerous Hammer films and lots of horror films, but he'd never died. And he just wanted to be able to die theatrically. And I said, well, we can work with that. And he looked at me and said, but how? I mean, I've read the script, and I said, well, we can just work with it. What are they going to see? Cut and make us do it again? He said, well, you got a good point there. So there was an opening where we started in the whole sequence, and he came into my flat, and I was hiding, of course, and he'd knocked over the jar of eyeballs, and I came over to the jar, and the ice pick was still in my hand, and I looked down at the eyeballs, started putting them back in the jar, going, ruined, absolutely ruined. And I looked up and said, I'll have to get more. And I came straight at him, and he was like, what? And I slammed the ice pick into the wall next to his head, the perfect theatrical scene from the camera angle. And he reacted perfectly to it and just died right there in the film. And then I left the body of the constable and looked around briefly, grabbed a couple of things quickly, and then walked out on the stage. And Terence Fisher still hadn't said cut. So I looked at him and said, well, that's about all I figured so far. We'll have to think of something else. And he went, oh, cut. And he was just blown away. He was like, wow, that's amazing. And he reshot it with us as a second take with the print that you see in the production. And he then took both copies and he showed them in dailies to everybody he could. He showed them with Peter, he shared it with, I think, Christopher Lee, and he shared it with numerous people in Hammer Studios and anywhere he could find to get information and get advice on what to do. His biggest problem was he couldn't figure out how to get me from the flat to the asylum if I killed the constable. And there were a couple of ideas. You could have Shane leave at that point and have him be picked up by a group of bobbies or something like that. Obviously the sergeant would be missed. There could be a manhunt, anything like that. It didn't even need to be a fast sequence or a long sequence. It could have been a fast, short sequence. But it was eventually decided that the entire sequence was a little bit too dark, so they dropped the sequence. But it's a really kind of nice thing that we had done just to be silly and to see what we could do with experimentation on the script. So at some point, maybe they'll restore that and you'll be able to see all of the film. Anyway, thank you very much for enjoying the film and for allowing us to still talk about it today. I loved working on that production. It was just absolutely amazing. I got to work with a lot of wonderful people who did numerous films, and they're even just minor characters in this, but they were wonderful people to work with. I can't tell you how much fun it was to walk in and look at the old codger from Dragon Slayer and going, you're in the film with me? Fantastic! That was just amazing. So, it was a lot of fun. Oh, and there is one real fun joke in The Monster from Hell, and that was at the end. As Peter picked up this glass shard that had been stuck in part of the furniture, and he dropped it. And then, of course, you had the cut, and it was the final cut of the entire film. And Terence was almost like moved to tears at this point. And I looked over at him and said, and I started laughing. Peter started laughing, and everybody started laughing, and he was like, what's the joke? And I walked over, grabbed the piece of glass, jammed it back, which made Peter just burst out laughing. And I said, okay, all right, let me explain, right? So Frankenstein comes over, grabs this piece, looks at it, inspects it as if it was something that maybe he could use in a later thing, decides against this, drops it. And then, of course, Terrence just burst out laughing with my explanation. We finally broke the mood that, you know, the film was finally over. This was the last shot. And Terrence had a great time with it. And we had such a great time working with Terrence. He's just an amazing director. But thank you.